you agree that, it's time that we all wake up and take responsibility, even for our ancestors that did not know any better?
Been waiting patiently to have this kind of conversation. Well, it's Wake Up with KC, and today I am going to talk about something that I love. Who doesn't love movies or even TV shows? But my understanding now that I know better is, what if, and I even asked this question, does film affect us even in our consciousness and our subconscious level? And I have a special guest, Ed Snyder and Sean Elliott, joining us today to talk about things like this. So please welcome Ed and Sean.
Hello, everybody.
Howdy, howdy.
I am so glad that we connected through Steve. Thank you, Steve. And you guys have a podcast called the Film Effect Podcast, and you guys talk about, it's like, what's their name back in the 80s? They were the film critics, and they had
Siskel and Hebert.
So how did you guys meet, for one, and how did the Film Effect Podcast start?
We met through a mutual friend, Joe, about 18 years ago or so.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, kind of serendipitous. We actually saw each other or met each other prior at an event, horror convention, and when I went to his apartment through our mutual friend, I saw his picture and I'm like, okay, I know you. I've seen you before.
I love this story. I never forget that moment. That was when we had really first started hanging out. You and Joe came over to just, have a few beers, eat a pizza, watch a movie, and you're looking at my movie collection and my action figures, and you saw the photos of me in cosplay. You're like, I was the guy in line. You and I were exchanging dialogue. Ed and I didn't even know each other. About a year later, we finally met. So that's a pretty neat story.
Yeah. Wow. So that was about 17, 18 years ago. And we just hit it off and been friends since. And we've always both been movie guys. That's just been something that we have a common interest in. And so the podcast started. Well, I started it last year with my daughter talking about movies. And then that lasted about 6-7 months. And my daughter she just turned 14 last week. So she was 13 then and was kind of just growing tired of it. And we kind of put that on the back burner, but I still wanted to pursue this and continue talking about movies. So I started the Film Effect back in February. Initially, I started it by myself, and then I asked Sean to come on about a month later, and that special guest spot turned into a permanent co-host spot. So
yeah, Ed asked me to come on to cover Michael Mann's Heat. That was an episode we did back in the early spring. And playing it back, there was just literally, we both saw, without tooting our own horns, we saw an undeniable, chemistry, exactly, that we felt should be shared with a like-minded audience.
Mm-hmm.
And it really changed the overall format and dichotomy of the show. I remember initially Ed was a little hesitant because he and I would get a little long in the tooth, and episodes were coming out to be like 3 hours long. He's like, dude, I don't know. I'm like, look, just throw it up there. It's not costing anybody nothing. If it's too long, they drop in, they drop out. Big deal. And now they can't, we can do 3.5 hours and they're asking for 2 more, so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been fun watching the podcast grow.
So. Yeah, for real.
You know what? I agree with you, even though, we're on 2 different podcasts. And mine's more of, the limited beliefs, the mental programmings, the emotional and energetic traumas, history, science, spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I think it all goes in tangent together. And, when it comes to films, growing up, there was films that I saw that for some reason inside of me is like there's something to that.
Hmm.
Can't quite pinpoint it, but there's
Right.
a
Right.
connection. And come to find out, it's like it was like a subliminal, like
Yeah.
Mhm.
keyword coding that they
Right.
put there in the movie. And then
Right.
I do research and there's actually history on it.
Hmm. I mean, everybody always says film is subjective. One person loves, another person hates. But if you love something and you're passionate about it, you go into a career of creating, and then those that have the same passion sit down and view. Again, it's like an unspoken, invisible connection with somebody on the other side of the the country, the globe, but you walk away touched. And I like to revisit a lot. I like to think of films sometimes like little time machines. Whether I'm good, bad mood, whatever, I throw something in, and I can go back to that moment in my life when I first discovered it and remember my first viewing. you know, and this is where it's brought us. You
Right. And it has changed a lot
Oh,
and
considerably.
evolved
Mhm.
some. And I'm realizing now that, because I became a history geek. And I
Right.
love now my favorite types of movies is documentaries.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Granted, it might come from the Hollywood kind of aspect, but I've learned now to discern what's true and what's hyped from the Hollywood
Right,
perspective of things.
right.
And the the one that hits me the most is all the war movies.
Mhm. What is it about it? The realism?
Well, to me, it was like I the World War One. Let's go back even further. Than that you have wars that were even written in the so-called Bible.
Right.
And
Mhm.
then ancient civilization. I could go far as back as ancient
Right.
civilization and how they were dividing and conquering and taking over land. And then I'm looking like, wow, it seems like history keeps repeating itself because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like they're
Yeah.
fighting over what? What was the
right.
Right.
purpose of all of that? And look at today. It's like
Yeah,
I'm like, has it turned into a business of some sort? Because, but the graphics of the from some of these wars like the Civil War, World War One, World War Two, Vietnam.
Mhm.
I do believe it was World War One where that's when the Spanish influenza outbreak
yeah,
pandemic happened, and from my understanding, the Americans brought it over to the European
yeah,
side.
and it spread.
And nobody actually won the war because they were all
No,
too sick to fight in the first place.
right.
But it's like to give you a visual
Mhm.
of what it was like to be back in those times. I couldn't even imagine.
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes into, again, like getting inside of a time machine and exposing you to a reality that you really don't currently have access to. Um, and you watch movies like 1917, and or Saving Private Ryan, and you have to realize that these are kids who legally couldn't drive a car or buy a beer. And they're subjected to this trauma, and it cements that reality a little more than just reading it in a textbook, or hearing your granddad tell a Korean War story. You know?
But you also gotta be careful because what comes with a lot of these not a lot, but some of them, these Hollywood movies is that Hollywood fabrication. So what's real and what's fabricated, you know? You gotta remember about facts and what's fact and what's, Billy Bob writing in the screenplay for this next war movie. That's not true. That has no realism to it or
Right,
factual,
right.
Right.
Which is
evidence.
which is why if you have the access to let's say a biopic and a documentary, to be able to compare them side to side to see how accurate that filmmaker got with his portrayal of this
Mhm.
incident in time, or this moment in this person's life. Those are my favorite type of movies, are those kind of biopics that transport
Mhm.
me to early 1920s, '70s with the doors, going up on in indecency charges and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
Right, and especially the the musicians and the artists back in those times, and it's just fascinating to me, just understanding history and getting glimpse. It's like you're getting a glimpse.
Right.
Right.
It's like peering through a looking glass.
Yeah, and but then would it be safe to say that the trauma and what happened back then can still affect us today?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example was, my first, I went and saw Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan in the theater, and anybody who's ever seen it never forgets that opening D-Day sequence. And it was just, you had never seen anything so realistic and horrific at that time. And I distinctly remember being in concession line before the film started. My girlfriend and I, it was like a weekday afternoon. We're, kind of anxious to see it. Had been out for a couple weeks. We've been hearing a lot of good things. And these two older gentlemen were behind us, and they're like, "Have you guys seen this yet?" And I'm like, "No." He's just, "I want to brace yourself. He and I served in World War II, and that's why we're here today. This is our, third viewing." And I mean, I was literally moved to tears. And again, it exposes you to that reality that's always been there, but you turn a blind eye to ignore. And
Right.
you paid your $8.50. You got to sit there and look at that screen and take it whether you like it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's other films that have, moved me to that point too, or have depicted, changed my perception on things. And I'll be damned if the director wasn't 98% nail on the head with what he put, committed to celluloid, but that was just one moment that I could, immediately draw on was, seeing Spielberg Saving Private Ryan, 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah, I remember when my parents saw it in the theater. I didn't see Saving Private Ryan in the theater. My parents did, and I remember Dale telling me about there was a veteran in the front, one of the front rows. After the movie was over and the credits were rolling, he couldn't even get up. He was
No,
just
there's
so moved to tears.
same thing with these gentlemen,
Yeah.
because the gentlemen behind us in line were literally behind us in the theater. Same thing. And this wasn't their first viewing. I remember by sharing with my father. Now we were it was coming, it was on HBO or whatever, and he was staying at
Yeah.
his place and I was staying at my
Right.
mom's. He had never seen it. So I called him up and I literally just sat on the phone with him for the first like half an hour and listened to him watch that secret. And he was weeping by the time he hung up the phone. He says,
Yeah.
"Thank you,
Right.
but I've got to recover myself, but I want to finish."
And
Wow. And
Yeah.
I interviewed another veteran that was from Vietnam.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And his first name is Michael, and I forgot his last name. It just like went out the window. And he shares his story of, he's like, "Oh, great, I'm gonna get to go home." And when he got home, he was in total shock.
Yeah, I mean, one of my all-time favorite films, in fact, Ed and I are gonna be covering this in a few months, is, Michael Cimino's Deer Hunter. That film, every time, will just, grab you by the gut, especially that whole, act 2 sequence in the POW camp and, even in the beginning at Steven's wedding when, the guys are getting ready to leave in the morning for Vietnam, and there's a veteran that just got home, and he's got that 1,000-yard stare. But they're
Yeah.
all just gung ho young kids. Like, let's, we're off to go save the country. Little did they know what they were walking into. And then boom, we just cut right to that next shot of, Michael with his flamethrower in the Hanoi jungle, and that
Oh
film,
yeah. And
that,
it's sad. And I even, when I was talking to Michael about it, I'm like, I'm so sorry because of the ancestors, and those that do not understand what it's like to be in your boots
right.
doing what you did,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
And the nice part of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But I feel the nice part is like somebody who's not going to take the time to sit down with an 1,100 page, book covering the ins and outs of, a major world war can at least dedicate 2 hours to some high quality film. I mean, they're not all, all war movies aren't the same.
No.
I mean, you got your handful of greats with, Full Metal Jacket and, Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, and they're iconic and legendary for a reason because they take that, that viewer on a horrific journey, but you still feel safe in your seat, unlike these poor folks going through it.
Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan or Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor.
It's no way, dude. Pearl Harbor was just so.
That's my point.
Oh my god!
It was so glossy and bloated.
Yeah.
Like I remember buying that on
and
DVD.
factually inaccurate.
Oh, horribly. I mean, the most accurate thing is Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character being the cook who just mans that machine gun and takes down 16 planes. I think that's the only thing that he got right. They call it Bayhem for a reason. So there's also a reason I've never looked at Pearl Harbor again in 25 years.
That's a 3-hour movie.
It's
Wow.
beyond that.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, after watching the Pearl Harbor with, of course, Ben Affleck, but then I actually saw some documentaries, and that was more horrific than watching the movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's, to me, honestly, war is senseless. It's nonsense.
No. Yeah. Right.
It's called the
money.
It's called the military industrial complex for a reason. And, we're ahead of any other nation in the world by, 20 to 30 times the input and output of, dollars that go into that complex.
Right.
It's disgusting. It's utterly disgusting.
Let me ask you something. I'm also from history to sci-fi. Now, I love sci-fis.
Okay.
Now, don't get me wrong. When they're, like Stargate,
right?
E.T., what is it? The Third Encounter, the
Close Encounters. Close
Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah.
I started questioning, like, hold up, there's something to this.
There's possibilities. Yeah. It comes back to that. Especially a very talented director at the top of his field, almost being that conduit. And, they always say that, the brightest lights burn out fast. But I mean, I'm a firm believer that some of my favorite filmmakers I don't want to say they're from outer space, but they have been touched, and their purpose on this planet is to take that talent and their vision and communicate this to the rest of the world, because the unseen creative higher power has called them to do that. I've always felt that way.
And then you got Aliens, and then the Predator and whatnot. I'm like, I don't know. I'd like to, think that they don't really look like that.
No.
And they really don't do that.
Right.
There are so many different interpretations of alien species throughout the history of film. It's not even
the traditional Pleiadian aliens from the Pleiades galaxy with the oblong head and the egg-shaped eyes, but
the Greys? I thought they were the Greys.
I was under the impression they were okay.
Species.
This is where I need to wake up, my fiance, because she spends hours watching Ancient Aliens, and she would sit here with you for 4 hours going into detail.
Oh, I would love to talk to her. I'm always
Anunnaki, and so she's a little under the weather right now. Otherwise, I bring her in. But yeah, she's educated me on the whole concept of the Anunnaki. And, I read Chariots of the Gods when I was in high school, and it made perfect sense to me.
Oh my gosh.
We can't.
Hello.
Yeah, there you go.
There
you go.
Zachariah Stitchin, and then I've got the Emerald Talent by Billy Carson.
Very cool. Very cool.
Stop.
I mean, at the end of the day, how arrogant do you have to be to figure that we're the only in this immense galaxy? We're the only ones out here. Come on now.
Come on, Adam and Eve.
That's self-centered and closed-minded. You talk about elitedness. You can't sell me on that.
No, and you can't sell me on Adam and Eve were the first human beings that, created. That
exactly. You can't.
Hello.
You mean I've been lied to this entire time?
Yes, you have, my friend.
You've been fed. Wait a minute. You've been fed that pill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Took the blue pill.
Yeah.
Took the green pill.
About Matrix?
I'm a fan of. Well, actually, I rewatched all 3 of the films last year during the pandemic, and I actually like all 3 movies. Looking forward to this 4th ride in a couple weeks. Personally, I think Sean's in a different boat than I am, though.
No. Actually, I'm looking
Are
forward because
you okay?
Mandy's never seen any of them, and
Oh, okay.
because we've got the newest one coming out on the 22nd. It's going to drop right on HBO Max. We haven't. We're planning of just like sitting down and just doing a
Right.
marathon. So like I did for her with the Star Wars movies and the Marvel movies
Mhm.
last year.
Right.
Just so she can just sit there and devour them without having to come back later on and remember what she saw a couple days, weeks ago. So yeah, no, I'm a fan. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
the first one was groundbreaking. The second two, held water, but I'm looking forward. It's been probably Mandy and I have been together over 10 years, so it's been longer than that since I'm looking at it.
Oh my gosh, you know what? You guys just gave me an idea. I'm gonna
What's
go
that?
on a binge and watch all the Matrix with my boyfriend so I
There
can
you
watch
go.
the one that comes out.
Yeah, well, if you have HBO Max, December 22nd, it loads right up.
Oh wow.
Speaking of
Yeah.
alien films, a friend of mine and I were like, again, fresh out of high school, but we were, you know, we're just like pretty much devouring as much as we could on alien abductions. And one day we decided to do a back-to-back double feature of Fire in the Sky
Fire in the Sky. I knew when I
about
saw that
Travis. Was
title.
it Travis Waltman? Was that his name?
Yeah.
Travis. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Fire
And
sure it
then
in the
was.
sky. Wow,
yes,
does that sound familiar? Almost biblical, you think?
right. And then immediately after that, we watched Communion, where Christopher Walken plays Whitley Strieber, and Strieber's been outspoken author about contact with
Oh
extraterrestrials.
wow.
So that's a nice little double feature of
I'll say.
biopics that tell the story of people who had
Right.
these type of encounters.
And then I was talking to, it was the first interracial couple that is recorded of being abducted by aliens and what they did to them.
Hmm.
And I
Wow.
can't, their name just went blank. But I was like, my boyfriend and I were watching it. And I was like, he's like, did you notice that? And I'm like, notice what? She goes, they're interracial and they're from the 1960s. Really?
Right. Huh.
He goes, you don't see that back in those
No.
times. And I'm like,
No.
no, you don't, apparently. But their niece wrote a book.
Wow.
And I've had who was it? Roderick Martin, who is in the MUFLO and Extraterrestrial Evidence. He has a podcast, and the disclosure that was coming out about how the government was going to finally admit that, yeah, there's other beings out there, kind of thing.
Right.
Which we're not stupid.
Yeah.
And there's more and more of these unidentified objects coming in. And I find that fascinating. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, it was just recently, I guess, earlier in the year. I believe it came from the government or NASA or
Yeah, it was.
that footage where that they basically admitted, like, here's a couple of clips of these things flying in outer space that we've been sitting on all this time. Yeah, they it's pretty much been acknowledged as of this summer. So little by little more is going to start trickling out.
Right.
Which
And
makes
they go underwater. I find that fascinating.
James Cameron's The Abyss.
Right. And based on, being a history.
Avatar.
Oh, yeah. I love that movie too. Oh, my God.
Saw it once.
I saw it. Hey, there's another Avatar 2 coming out.
He's got like 5 of them lined up. That's the
I
only
think
work
he's
gonna
dedicated
do
the
for,
rest
like,
of his career to those films.
yeah, he's just like, I'm just making Avatar movies for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, my goodness.
what else is he gonna do?
I mean, back to the well.
True Lies
money.
2.
Right.
Oh, my gosh. That is funny.
I know.
There's another one based. Now, would you agree that, the books give more detailed information? And then when they create the movie?
Absolutely. I mean, it's next to impossible to get everything, translated perfectly to the screen. There's only a handful of films that have, successfully taken, 98% of that source material and put it up there. Because otherwise you'd be watching a, 18-hour
Well,
movie. And
there's also like adaptations of like short stories that are
true.
also like Stephen King, a
Right.
lot of his films or short stories, I'm sorry, have been turned into like these hour and a half, 2 hour films,
Hmm.
adding material, of course, to do so.
Right.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of something else,
Like
but
honestly, you mentioned Stephen King, and speaking about movies, here's
Mhm.
Johnny. Uh,
Yeah.
I
Shiny.
question, like, what in the world were you drinking and smoking to create that kind of movie?
Well, I mean, he's always been a little touched in the head, but I mean, the guy, I mean, the guy was cranking out like he literally got told by his publishers to knock it off. He was releasing too many books in a year. That's why he started writing under Richard Bachman so he could get more of these stories out.
Oh,
He was told, cut it out. We just released something 6 weeks ago. What the hell is this? So it's why he created the Bachman books.
oh, I did not know that. That's
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also like, it was
Well,
kind of see if they would sell without his name on it, but it was a way to kind of circumvent that. But I literally just read that. Like he was cranking out so much, and his publisher was like, "We're gonna sit on these till next year. We already dropped 5 already."
you also got to remember something. Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, he has no recollection at all of directing of directing Maximum Overdrive, the one and only film he's ever directed. He has
Right.
no clue of anything that happened on set.
Oh,
Are you serious? That's how drunk
Yeah,
he was?
it's back in the
yeah.
80s.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think what was it? One of his books, he was so coked up, he don't remember writing it. Like he don't remember writing, I think, Cujo, and doesn't remember directing Maximum Overdrive. And they were
Yeah.
they were his own work.
I mean, we're talking
Oh,
like he's when we say he's cranking out books, he's not cranking out like Goosebumps editions. He's cranking
No,
out like 400 or 500 page books.
easily tunes. I think
I
the
can't.
stand is
No
almost
one with a
1,400
straight
pages.
mind can think that quickly. I don't
Mm-mm.
believe that's
Yeah,
insane.
yeah.
So
oh
yeah,
my gosh. And you know who my superhero was back in the 80s?
Who's that?
Dee Wallace from Cujo.
We actually
wow, we just talked to her
we
two
talked to
hours,
her
3 hours
about 2
ago.
hours ago. We have
Yeah,
an episode coming up, but we spent a good half an hour talking with Dee this afternoon.
she's amazing. She
Yeah,
is.
she's
That's
very
so
sweet
crazy you
lady.
bring her up.
She's very spiritual, and she channels just like I
Yeah,
channel different than she does, but
Yeah.
I never knew that was, like she was like-minded like me.
yeah.
Mhm.
I just thought she was an actress,
No,
actress, and
she
Yeah,
just published a book. We talked about that for a good while,
she's a
you
real
know?
deal. She's really
Yeah,
cool.
she's a very sweet lady. I met her in person about 20 years ago and shared the story with her this afternoon. But yeah, it's just funny that you mentioned that. Number one, Cujo was her favorite movie that she's ever done. She told us
oh, she shared some
Yeah.
things with me about Cujo, and I'm like, girl, you should have gotten an Oscar for that one.
that. Oh
Because
yeah,
let me
yeah.
tell
Yeah.
you
We had
something.
it was a very informative, rewarding 30-minute conversation with her just a few
Right.
hours ago this afternoon. That'll
Well,
be
I'm
on the
glad you
plane in a couple
enjoyed her
weeks.
just as much as I did.
Sweet lady, sweet
Yeah.
lady.
She's the
She
best.
is, and she's funny too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shared some great
She
stories.
really is. Her and Laura Banks. I just got done recently with Laura Banks from Star Trek: The Wrath of
Mhm.
Khan
Right,
with Ricardo
Montalban.
Montalban.
Yep,
Oh my
Ricardo
gosh,
Montalban.
she talks so highly of him. I'm like, he just seems like an old kindred soul. Very
Yeah,
cool, calm, full of wisdom. I'm like, she goes, he was amazing. He would even, like, I wasn't feeling good, and he would just get out of his chair and make sure I sat in the chair. And perfect gentleman.
very
And I'm
nice.
like, boy, those are rare and a few,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Especially at that level in your career too. I mean,
Yeah, and both women shared with me what it was like back then being in the film. It was very rare that the women had the lead characters. It was always the
well,
men,
yeah,
and women played like the damsel in distress
right.
kind of mentality.
Yeah,
And
because I mean, Dee told us when she saw that script, she knew that she had to do that because, you didn't see that empowering of a female character, very often at all. She was not going to miss that opportunity. And it's obvious she's not afraid to work in that genre. And she admitted that it's, because it gives her such range,
Yeah.
to play these type of characters. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why Cujo's her favorite, just because, she starts off like a typical suburban mom and then right into survival mode for the last hour of the film.
I know, in a car.
Yeah.
Of all things, the car was like major point.
Just stuck in there. Yeah.
Yeah, because she was talking about, because I actually brought Cujo up because it was her follow-up film after E.T., and I asked her what it was about that brought her back into the horror genre, and she just talked about the character and everything, and getting to work with her husband too on the same movie.
Yeah, she wound up sneaking him in there.
Yeah.
Got him cast.
Hear that with me.
Yeah, like she recommended Christopher Stone without telling the casting agent that they were married. And then he winds up getting cast. She tells a sweet story where the casting agent goes to call Chris to tell him he got the part, and Dee answers the phone, and he's like, "Oh, I just wanted to call and tell your friend we gave him the part. I must have dialed the wrong number." She's like, "No, hold on a minute. Here he is." And she said, like, you hear this 5 seconds of silence while the agent kind of puts it together in his head, like, "Oh shit, I just cast husband and wife." It's a fun little story.
Yeah,
that episode will be
so
up.
Adorable.
Yeah, that episode will be up in a few months.
There was like 12 dogs for that one film.
Right.
Trying to chase and get to the one trainer, 12 dogs, and he would sleep in the barn with them during filming.
Makes sense.
And I was like, wow, wow, what a masterpiece.
Yeah.
You didn't know that until crazy.
Yeah.
So what movies are you both more drawn to than any of the others?
Probably horror.
Ed's definitely, obviously you take a look at the posters behind him. Ed's definitely a big horror guy.
Oh yeah.
I've got a wide variety in my living room here. I've got everything from Stripes to Doctor Strange to Clockwork Orange, 2001. It's not so much a genre, it's the art itself that touches me.
True.
And I think that I like telling this story. What I figured finally, like when the light bulb finally went off in my head, it was when I think I was maybe a junior in high school, would have been about 1990, 91. So I distinctly remember watching Brian De Palma's Carrie on television, late 70s, like on a commercial run at maybe the age of 3 or 4. And then done maybe a year or two later, that Halloween, I knew that the film was about to be aired again on the local channel. And I was so petrified at the age of, I don't know, I would have been probably 6 or 7, that I was begging my father to call the local news station to tell him not to play it in case I happened to switch the channel. He's like, "We just won't watch channel 13 for 2 hours." But I'm like, what if I'm changing the channel and I see something? So so that's how much the impact it had on me. I watched it at 3, and
All
then
about you, Sean.
terrified of it by like 7. And then it came on probably Showtime or HBO, so I had recorded it on VHS, and I'd had this copy that I had recorded I was sitting on it for over probably close to a year before I could muster up to put that in and finally press play. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You're 16 years old. Why are you afraid of this film that petrified you at a young age? And that's when it dawned on me that there's a lasting effect from this art form. And that's when I just, like, any film that would come out that piqued my interest, I had to devour it. So I can't really finger one genre. I love a ton of horror movies, handful of foreign films, your classics from, Scorsese, Cimino, Coppola, Marvel movies, Star Wars, not so much the new ones, but I could, if you had to tell me to pick one genre for the rest of my life, I'd probably just have to end it right there. I just couldn't do it. There's no way. My mood changes day to day.
Ed, why horror?
Because I've always enjoyed the feeling of being scared. Not that movies are scary as much nowadays. It's actually a damn rare commodity to find a truly scary film nowadays.
Yeah.
But there's always the classics, and I see myself. I mean, this past October, I watched maybe 2 average a day tops, and looking at my collection right now, there's a lot of like stuff between 70s giallo to 80s slashers to just 90s. I don't know. The 90s was just a really batshit crazy decade for horror in general because there was a lot of direct-to-video stuff that came out that decade. But
It was a glorious time to be a 14-year-old boy. Let me tell you.
yeah, but I don't know. It's just it's kind of like what I was talking about at the top of the hour, like just that reality and just escaping to it and horror. It all circles back to that what I just initially said, just being scared. I enjoy it. I enjoy that
That jolt, but
the
from the
joke, but
from the
I
safety of
enjoy
your
like
couch.
I enjoy the atmosphere of a nice old school horror movie. You know, I mean, goes without saying, Halloween's my favorite time of the year. So September and October are my favorite months. I just love that time of year. I'm
Yes,
just
he does.
a festive Halloween guy. That's me. You know. I,
Well,
I I love horror for a variety of reasons. It's really hard to pinpoint and give you one reason. Many
well,
reasons why.
the thing about it is Friday the 13th and Halloween. Okay, how many
Hmm.
times does Michael, have to die and come back to life? I mean, come on. It
Well,
gets ridiculous after a while.
I'm not gonna sit here and defend every single Michael Myers sequel because they're not all winners. But
No.
you know, I can sit here. Perfect example, Halloween. I can sit back and I can rewatch the first movie on loop over and over. Probably not get tired of it. I think it's one of the best created horror films of all time. John Carpenter just knocked it out of the park when he made that movie back in '78.
Yeah.
And I, I can choose to watch that over and over, or maybe I can give someone else's, you know, vision of the Michael Myers character and see what they have, taking a swing. It I like seeing other filmmakers take chances and maybe try and surprise me, you know.
Yeah, I mean, at the
Uh,
end of the day, if you come into that genre and you're expecting logic and you can't suspend disbelief, then why did what are you doing watching this type of film?
Right,
That's what Saving Private Ryan is for.
right.
That's what
Right.
Bohemian Rhapsody is for. This is the
I
fun.
loved that movie.
Oh yeah,
And
Rocket Man was good too.
Elton John. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Rocket Man.
those are not so. I'm getting to the point now where I'm realizing, like, okay, if we're projecting, violence and all the hatred and anger and all that other stuff, then we're just repeating itself. We're just keep creating more of it. So
Is
that's
that what
why I had
can
to
I ask
finally put the, axe and stay away from it because
can I ask you a question?
I'm at a different level now of energy and I'm so sensitive that I can't be around that.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is that what you think horror is? Like just a lot of negativity and people okay.
It brings out a negative energy.
Okay.
Fair enough. To me, it's escapism and
Yeah, that's exactly what it is to me. It's escapism.
being put in a very tense, almost traumatized with the good ones, an almost traumatizing situation without, you're going to be safe in a couple hours when the lights go back up, and seeing some of the level of creativity with some, these effects and especially practical effects, like seeing somebody like who the hell thought that up and how did they execute it. That's what keeps me coming back, especially to the.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's only a movie. It's make believe. It's like I
Right.
tell my daughter all the time.
Yep.
Don't get too scared. It's not. It's fun to be scared, but don't think it's real because it's not.
Right. They're not coming out of the TV to get you.
Well,
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
guy
come
in that
on,
hockey
both
mask
ways.
is an actor.
And I've seen, like, and I understand about a spiritual aspect because there's poltergeist, then the haunting, then you
Mhm.
got what was that movie? The Omen with the 666
Yeah,
that they
Yeah.
Damien.
Gregory
created
Peck.
and all of that. And now I I look back and I'm like, holy shit, we are all creators. So if you create something in a movie, what are the chances of it coming into a reality that we're going to live in it? Because I've seen some movies way back when I was a kid, and all of a sudden, 10, 20 years later, holy shit, this happened in a movie, and I did something. Now we're seeing it in live, like in real.
That's why there's always going to be the question: does life imitate art, or vice versa? And I think that some of these filmmakers that specialize in that genre, they're like exercising the demon through the work, if you will.
So there's a dark, there's just like there's good and evil, good and bad. It's the same in the film industry as well. You want to call them dark forces or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, some of the nicest people you would never expect to have a dark side are horror filmmakers in the genre. And it's not like I'm seeing what you're saying. But my argument would be in a form of a question: how many filmmakers have you read about that went on and imitated their own art? None. It's never heard.
It's not like
you never heard of Wes Craven going and dressing up and haunting people in their dreams. You never heard of Sean S. Cunningham slapping on a hockey mask and going and killing camp counselors. Toby Hooper didn't rev up a chainsaw in the 70s and go, slicing people up. It
was just a way to tell a story, a different story.
Yeah, and it kind of circles back to what Sean was saying, escapism. It works both ways. It's an escapism for the viewer and an escapism for the filmmaker and as well.
So it's definitely a dichotomy, like a symbiosis.
Right.
Well, the first movie I saw was Jaws. So, and that...
When's the last time you went swimming in the ocean?
I still swim in the ocean,
See?
but not as much.
I rest my case.
However, do you know what made that movie? They went way past over the budget, but you know what made that
Every movie does. What's that?
The music. The shark was broke majority of the movie.
Yeah.
That damn Bruce.
Yeah. Fantastic documentary called The Shark Is Still Working. It runs almost 3 hours about the making of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like da-dun, da-dun.
They don't even reveal them for an hour.
Music has an effect too.
But it's an ingredient for the movie.
Yeah, it's an overall experience. I mean, it's kind of baked into the cake, if you will.
So
Exactly.
if I'd like to, I mean, it's just astounding to me. Now I'm more into comical things that make me laugh. Now, if I want, to experience something scary, I'll go and prank somebody and go, "Hey, what are you doing?" I do that at my work. There's someone that does it to me all the time, but I got something in store for him. Little pranks that will make him jump, kind of thing. So that's what I enjoy. That is fine to me.
I mean, exactly. Everyone's different. I mean, Penny Marshall made a lot of movies for people like you if you want that kind of comfort,
Right.
And the same goes for there's so many different filmmakers. I can't even think of one at the top of my head, but like
well, look at one who's bringing up Penny Marshall. Ex-husband Rob Reiner was able to dip his toes in a lot of genres, made some classic, heartwarming comedies, but also directed the, Stephen King's Misery.
Look at her brother, Frank Marshall. Gary Marshall. Okay. I'm sorry, Gary Marshall. What? Frank Marshall, different person in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Gary Marshall. But you see my point. But yeah, it film affects people in different ways, and I really don't know what else to say on top of that.
I think I can sum it up in a sentence, and this was told to me by an actor by the name of Bill Moseley. Works a lot with Rob Zombie, and I met Bill several times. And
good guy.
Yeah, very good guy. And his House of a Thousand Corpses sequel, Devil's Rejects, was about to release that summer, and he remembered me the previous year because the character that he played in the first film is exactly who I was dressed as when I went to that convention and Ed and I had that back and forth before knowing each other because Ed was a fan too. And we were talking about, what I can expect in this upcoming film. And he described a scene that was very hard for him to get through. Scene that he had to do with Priscilla Barnes, who used to, from Terry from Three's Company.
It's a very disturbing scene.
It's a very disturbing scene. And he was like on the verge of tears. And Rob Zombie pulled him aside and he said, Sean, he said this one sentence to me that I was immediately able to just compartmentalize what I was feeling and get on with the work. And he looked at me and he said, art is not safe. Art is not safe.
Yeah.
From Rob Zombie. Yes.
Wow.
I love that story. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Art is not safe.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, when I mentioned earlier about, there's always a dark side and a light side, and, with the movies, even TV shows and whatnot, I see an off balance. And I feel like there's something about to happen to shift to there's a little bit more of the light than the dark.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like you need to like a release valve. You're so tensed up, full of pressure, you got to release that pressure, hence, a change in tone.
Right.
For a few minutes, allowing you the chance to breathe and, remind yourself it's only a movie.
And there's like, there's something called that I remember watching. It was a film. I think it was streamed. I'll have to go back. And it was, there's a movie Convergent. It has to do, and there are certain movies about an epidemic that happens and it affects the world. And Planet of the Apes. It's like a different.
Steven Soderbergh's Contagion. Very prescient.
Yes, Contagion. That's what it is.
But Outbreak.
But then you go back to Planet of the Apes.
Mm-hmm.
That is the same thing.
Start with a virus.
Yeah.
It started with the virus, and I'm like, I'm connecting the dots.
Huh?
And it's like, okay, I see where they're showing us some things. Like it was almost like prophetic.
Well, Ed and I covered, when did we do Contagion on the show? Ed, back like June, July?
Contagion was back in September. It was a few months ago. It was like 4 or 5 months ago.
Right. And it was actually requested. It was one of the ones that, our listeners we put a poll up.
Yeah, it was a request.
So looking at it now, after spending, at that time, 18 months living through a pandemic, and this film was, 10 years old at this point. I mean, it was literally exactly how this played out. So, again, that's where I argue the point that some of these top-notch filmmakers are touched by a higher power with a third eye. And I mean, what Soderbergh laid out there, what was that, Ed? 2010, 11? When that came out?
2011. Yep.
Mm-hmm. 10 years later, I'll be damned if it didn't happen. It didn't spread the exact same way, and the populist reaction and the government's reaction and solution were exactly what we just lived through. It was almost scary to watch that after coming out.
Well, I saw parts of that, but then I saw something else, and I cannot find it. I probably could if I went back and did more research, but it was how these top-notch people were having a meeting and they were rehearsing and playing out how the virus is going to come out, how it's going to affect this, how it's going to, and it wasn't from the Contagion movie. It's a different, they went in and recorded this live of how they were all going to do it. And then it was going to happen. And then how it's going to affect the economy, how it was going to affect, I mean, I was just, and I'm like, wow, that came out in 2017.
Right.
This thing was done and filmed on 2017. So I don't know what month, but 2017, it was released. And then 2019, 2 years later. They prepped for this.
And that brings you right back.
Prophetic, like, hey, we're going to do this, but they're actually, like, the dark side is working against the light side.
I mean, it brings you back to that, you know, that ultimate paradox: is life imitating art, or is art imitating life? You know, and I don't think we're ever going to get a definitive answer on that topic, or for that question.
Yeah, doubtful.
Ever, not in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Well, but then I look at it this way too. Well, we could stop the negative by focusing more on the positive.
For sure. If everybody could get into that type of mindset, I believe that type of energy very well changed the world into a better place that they sang about in the Coca-Cola ad in 1971, you know. But will we ever get there? Will we ever get everybody on board?
Could be.
No, this pandemic this pandemic has been a reminder that no, that we're as far as like humanity is concerned, I feel like we're screwed. Because you still got people. We're going on 2 years now into this stuff, and there's still people arguing the oh my god, just what's the shot? The
vaccine.
Vaccine. Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
You're welcome, buddy.
I mean, there's still people that are like arguing the vaccine. Like, I'm not going to get a vaccine. I'm going to get it. You should get vaccinated. I'm never going to get vaccinated. It's, you know, and don't even get me started on social media. That's where you see it half the time. And it's a reminder every day. It's like, we cannot get on the same page. It's something as simple as the vaccine, which should be life-saving. And we're arguing that still to this day. You know, that government control, a poison, you know, I've heard it all, you know, and it's like, if we all just get on board and do what we're supposed to do, it'd be a lot different and a lot better.
It's a sad state of affairs when you have to admit that, you know, basic human nature is almost toxic at this point.
Well, and you know what, man,
it doesn't have to be.
We do it to ourselves, though.
Right.
You know,
break the cycle.
There's some people that love power, control, manipulation, and greed, but there's some people that are honest and generous and loving and caring. And so you got these two things at war with each other. And I'm just, now my next question is, what movies are you going to watch? And what have you watched recently? I could tell I watched Dune. That was interesting.
I loved it. I watched it 3 times. Cannot wait for the second half.
I watched the original one, and then I watched the one with what's her name? The new one?
Zendaya.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a little
I saw the original in the theater, and then I just watched, you know, Villeneuve's adaptation from home via streaming.
So I like the older version than I do the new one.
The older version has its merits, but it's definitely a little schlocky and, you know, shows its age and the time it was made in.
Well, at least I got to see the guy ride the worm. Hello.
Right. Well, you
didn't see that. I think there's a key point of the guy riding the worm. Okay.
Next October, you will. Those like my personal favorite character of Fade Ralpha wasn't even mentioned because they're saving him for the second half, which will be out October of 23. I believe.
And what about you, Ed? What did you recently watch?
Oh, Ghostbusters was damn good. I haven't really been to the movies lately, which is surprising. The last truly great movie I saw was Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho, which came. Edgar Wright, he's a English filmmaker.
Shaun of the Dead,
Hot Fuzz. What was the other one? The World's End.
At World's End.
He did Baby Driver a few years ago.
Involved with the BBC series Spaced with a lot of people from Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, but anyway, he did a horror film that came out back in September that I was just blown away by.
Yeah, I'm actually mad you didn't call me and say you were going. I would have loved to have went with you.
But yeah, that I mean, we're coming off of October, so a lot of horror stuff. But
Naturally, Ed and I have an annual screening of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles the Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. So that's
the
one.
last great film I watched was the other night for our podcast, Parasite.
Yeah, yeah, hands down. I'm going to say that's the last great movie that I watched.
Yeah.
So what upcoming movies are you going to be watching now?
Personally, or just for the show?
Well, personally and for the show that you guys can talk about.
I mean, personally, every day is different for me.
Yeah,
Who knows what I'm going to be watching tomorrow. I can't answer that question. It all depends on whatever I want to watch. What I'm in the mood for.
If me and this guy combined our DVD and Blu-ray collections, we could outnumber, a local Blockbuster twice over. That's how many we got.
I mean, to give you a general idea, for the next handful of weeks, we got No Country for Old Men coming up, Argo, Christmas Vacation, Rain Man, The Departed, Reservoir Dogs, Serial Mom, The Hills Have Eyes, and The Irishman.
Yeah, so we kind of, we cover we run the whole gamut on the show. We don't specialize or focus on one particular.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, something in there for everybody. I mean, this guy and I, since I joined the show, I think we've got together probably 50 episodes in the can.
Yeah, at least 50. At least 50, yeah.
February.
Well, congratulations. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
we got more to come, and the number, the algorithm, the numbers just keep going, getting better. So
awesome. So when can people tune into your show, your podcast?
We drop new episodes every Tuesday morning. If you subscribe to us, you might wake up to a surprise one day, because sometimes we drop bonus episodes too that people don't know about. So
yeah, we were cranking out some content a few months ago. I think it was 1 week we must have dropped 4 episodes on people when they were used to only 1. They were like, Jesus, you guys are stopping.
That was fun. It wasn't so much fun to edit, but it was a lot of fun to do.
Sometimes this guy and I'll sit here and do, that we just did 2 back-to-back Saturday nights. Spent a good, almost 6 hours recording for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Parasite. So sometimes there's a bonus episode that, whether it be because of an anniversary of a particular film or a holiday, sometimes you're guaranteed 1 a week from the Film Effect, but
every Tuesday.
Sometimes you get more than 1 a week.
Oh, wow.
Tuesday morning is my weekly commitment. So you're always going to get an episode on Tuesday.
Yep. And they average is about 2 hours. We've got some that run a little shorter, some that have run, closer to 4, because we just get so passionate and dig deep.
Yes.
That is, you know what? I wish you the best of success.
Thank you.
And I really enjoyed talking to you guys
about
movies.
We appreciate you having us on.
For real. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
And everybody can tune into you guys. I put all your information and contact on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You know, once again, best of luck. And I can't thank you for being here, and
thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely, Kimberly. Thanks for having us on. This is a hoot.
Yeah, check us out, and
invigorating discussion.
It's been nice talking about something that wasn't really movie
centric,
although
change
it was,
the subject for
but a little bit. Yeah, exactly. So.
Oh, really good, because I'm like, this is what I like to talk about.
Good.
Other
We like it.
Perspective of what they think about movies, what affects us, and things like that, because it has to do. And I like that last quote: "Art is not safe."
I've never forgotten it, and I can still envision the moment in my mind when Bill Mosey was telling me that the film hadn't even come out yet, and then I saw the film and I knew exactly what scene he was talking about. But yeah, he said Rob Zombie took him aside and said, "Bill, art is not safe," and I've just always worn that on my sleeve ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to create a new safe of art with love and good vibes.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Something for everybody.
Thanks again, guys. Have a wonderful and amazing week.
Thanks, you too. Happy holidays to you.
Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
Merry
Take
Christmas.
care.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you go. You never know who I have on my show. And I love having these kind of conversations. So stay tuned for the next episode of Wake Up with KC.
Do you agree that, it's time that we all wake up and take responsibility, even for our ancestors that did not know any better?
Been waiting patiently to have this kind of conversation.